The stars looked different from here. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the twin suns of the Kepler 442 system cast their light across the new human colony below. 3 years had passed since humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, and already they had established 7 colonies beyond their home system. New Terra, as the colonists called this world, was perfect for human life. The air was breathable, the gravity was close to Earth normal, and the soil was rich enough to grow Earth crops. 2,000 colonists had made this place their home, building farms and small cities in the rolling green valleys. Sarah had been patrolling this sector for 6 months now, making sure the trade routes stayed safe and the colonists had everything they needed. It was peaceful work, and she liked it that way. After spending 10 years fighting in Earth's last corporate wars, peace felt good. That peace ended when the alien ships appeared. They came without warning, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 12 sleek vessels, each one twice the size of Sarah's ship. Their hulls were smooth and silver, like polished mirrors that reflected the light of the twin suns. They moved with mechanical precision, taking positions around the planet in a matter of minutes. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Sarah's tactical officer, looked up from his console with worry in his eyes. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from those ships. Their weapons are charged and ready." Sarah nodded. She had expected this day might come. Earth's scientists had always wondered if humans were alone in the galaxy. Now they had their answer, and it didn't look friendly. "Open a communication channel," Sarah ordered. "Let's see what they want." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the alien flagship. The creature that appeared made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. Its head was elongated, with large black eyes that held no warmth. When it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "I am High Curator Vexthai of the Zephyrian Collective," the alien said. "You will identify yourself and explain your presence in collective space." Sarah straightened her uniform and stepped forward. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen, of the United Earthship Defiance. This is human colony space established by legal right of settlement. We're peaceful people who just want to build new homes." Vexthai's expression didn't change. "Your species is unknown to the collective. You have no legal right to be here. This system is reserved for future collective expansion. You will evacuate immediately." "With respect," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "We've been here for 2 years. We've built homes, farms, schools. These people have made lives here. We can't just abandon everything." The alien's black eyes seemed to grow even colder. "Your primitive species does not understand galactic law. The Zephyrian Collective has ruled this sector for 3,000 years. We determine who may settle where. You are trespassers." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept it under control. Diplomacy was the only way to solve this peacefully. "Perhaps we can work something out. There are plenty of empty systems in this sector. Surely there's room for both our peoples." Vexthai made a sound that might have been laughter, but it held no humor. "You speak as if you are our equals. Your species has barely learned to leave your home system. Your technology is crude, your ships are primitive, and your weapons are laughably weak. You are nothing more than barely evolved primates playing with toys you don't understand." The insult hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain calm. "We may be new to space travel, but we're not primitive. We're willing to negotiate. What would it take for our people to stay?" "Nothing," Vexthai said flatly. "You will evacuate this system within 7 rotations, or we will remove you by force. Your colonists will be relocated to detention facilities until transport back to your home system can be arranged. Your ships will be confiscated or destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is an order." Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "And if we refuse? Then you will learn why the galaxy fears the Zephyrian Collective. We have ended the expansion of 47 species who thought themselves capable of challenging us. Your people would be the 48th. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen. The bridge was silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Everyone was looking at her, waiting for orders. Lieutenant Webb was the first to speak. "Captain, should I contact Earth Command?" Sarah nodded slowly. "Send a priority message to Admiral Harrison. Tell him we have first contact with a hostile alien species demanding evacuation of all human colonies. Request immediate reinforcements and instructions." "Ma'am," said Communications Officer Lisa Park, "I'm receiving transmissions from the colony. Governor Martinez wants to know what's happening." Sarah sighed. "How do you tell 2,000 people that their new home might be taken away by aliens? Tell the governor I'll be down to meet with the Colonial Council in 2 hours. We need to discuss evacuation procedures." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah met with the colonial leadership and explained the situation. The reaction was exactly what she expected. Some people wanted to fight, others wanted to negotiate, and still others just wanted to pack up and leave immediately. Governor Martinez was a former Marine, and his response was typical. "Captain, we didn't come all this way just to run at the first sign of trouble. These people have invested everything they have in this colony. We can't just abandon it." "I understand how you feel," Sarah replied. "But we're talking about 12 alien warships against 1 human cruiser and a few colonial defense boats. The math isn't in our favor." "Maybe not," Martinez said. "But we're Americans, damn it. We don't run from bullies." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the colony's chief scientist, had been quiet during most of the meeting. Now she spoke up. "Captain, I've been analyzing the sensor data from those alien ships. Their technology is definitely more advanced than ours, but it's not magic. They use energy weapons and plasma shields, but their ships seem to rely heavily on automated systems." "What are you thinking, Doctor?" Sarah asked. "I'm thinking that advanced doesn't always mean better," Elena replied. "Sometimes the simple solution is the best one." The meeting ended without any real decisions. They needed orders from Earth Command, and those would take time to arrive. Sarah returned to her ship to wait and prepare for whatever came next. She didn't have to wait long. On the 4th day of the deadline, one of the Zephyrian ships moved closer to the asteroid mining station on the edge of the system. The station was operated by a crew of 50 miners who were extracting rare metals to ship back to Earth. Station Commander Jake Torres was a tough ex-Navy man who had been mining asteroids for 15 years. When the Zephyrians ordered him to evacuate, his response was short and to the point: "Go to hell." Sarah watched the tactical display as the alien ship powered up its weapons. She opened a channel to the mining station. "Jake, you need to get your people out of there now. They're going to fire." "Negative, Captain," Jake replied. "We've got families depending on this operation. Besides, I'm not running from some alien bullies. Let them come." The Zephyrian ship fired a single shot. A beam of brilliant blue energy lanced out and struck the mining station's central hub. The explosion was visible from Sarah's ship, millions of kilometers away. In seconds, the station and all 50 people aboard were gone. The bridge of the Defiance was silent. Sarah stared at the expanding cloud of debris that had been a space station and 50 human lives just moments before. Her hands were shaking with rage. "Captain," Lieutenant Webb said quietly. "Incoming. Transmission from the Zephyrian flagship." Vexthai appeared on the screen again, looking as emotionless as before. "That was a demonstration of collective power. You now have 3 rotations to evacuate this system. Any further resistance will result in similar consequences." "You murdered 50 innocent people," Sarah said, her voice barely controlled. "We eliminated trespassers who refused lawful orders," Vexthai replied coldly. "Your species will learn to obey collective authority or you will cease to exist. The choice is yours." The transmission ended. Sarah turned to her communications officer. "Lieutenant Park, send another priority message to Earth Command. Tell them the aliens have opened fire and killed 50 civilians. Tell them we need those reinforcements now." "Already sent, Captain," Park replied. "But even at maximum speed, the nearest battle group won't be here for 6 days." Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the alien ships surrounding their new world. 12 against 1. The smart thing would be to evacuate the colonists and retreat. Wait for reinforcements and come back later with better odds. But 50 good people were dead, murdered for the crime of trying to make an honest living. The aliens thought humans were primitive, weak, barely evolved primates who would run at the first show of force. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Lieutenant Webb," Sarah said, "bring us to battle stations. Load all missile tubes and charge the railguns." "Ma'am?" Webb looked confused. "Captain, we're outnumbered 12-1. Their ships are larger and more advanced than ours." "Maybe so," Sarah replied, "but they just made a big mistake. They killed our people and called us primitive. Now they're going to learn why you should never underestimate humans when they're angry." She opened a channel to the Colonial Defense Force. "All defense boats, this is Captain Chen. Form up on the Defiance. We're going to show these aliens what humans do when someone threatens our families." The response came back immediately from a dozen different voices. The colonists might not have military training, but they were Americans and they weren't going to run from a fight. Sarah looked at the tactical display one more time. 12 alien warships against 1 human cruiser and 8 colonial defense boats. The odds were terrible, but sometimes the odds didn't matter. Sometimes all that mattered was that you stood up and fought for what was right. "All ships," she broadcast. "This is Captain Chen. Today we make first contact with an alien species. They think we're weak because we're new to space travel. They think we'll run because they have bigger ships. They're about to learn that being human means never giving up, no matter what the odds." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. Good people, all of them. People who believed in something bigger than themselves. "Attack formation," Sarah ordered. "Take us in." The UES Defiance and her small escort of colonial defense boats turned toward the alien fleet. Behind them, on the surface of New Terra, 2,000 colonists watched their protectors head into an impossible fight. None of them were running. They were human, and humans didn't abandon their own. High Curator Vexthai watched the primitive human ships approach his fleet, with something that might have been amusement. The lead vessel was barely half the size of his smallest escort, and the others were even smaller. Their weapons were crude, projectile systems and primitive energy weapons that his shields could easily absorb. "Sub-Curator Nethvar," he said to his tactical officer, "disable their engines and capture their crews. I want to study these humans before we dispose of them. Perhaps we can learn something about their species that will make future encounters more efficient." "At once, High Curator," Nethvar replied. "Shall I deploy the standard pacification formation?" "Yes, but use minimum power settings. I don't want to accidentally destroy them before we can extract useful information." Vexithai had seen this scenario play out dozens of times before. A new species would challenge collective authority, make some futile gesture of resistance, and then surrender when they realized how outmatched they were. The humans would be no different. He was wrong. The first surprise came when the human cruiser didn't try to engage his flagship directly. Instead, it accelerated toward one of his escort vessels, firing its primitive kinetic weapons at maximum rate. The projectiles bounced harmlessly off the Zephyrian ship's shields, but then something unexpected happened. The human ship rammed the Zephyrian escort. Vexthai stared in shock as the human vessel, its hull crumpled and atmosphere venting from multiple breaches, ground against his escort shields. The energy barriers held for a few seconds, then overloaded from the sustained contact. The human ship's momentum carried it through, and its jagged hull tore into the Zephyrian vessel's smooth armor. Both ships exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "Report!" Vexithai demanded. "The Seeker of Truth is destroyed," Nethvar said, his voice betraying confusion. "The humans, they used their ship as a weapon. All hands lost on both vessels." Vexithai's pale blue skin grew even paler. In 3,000 years of collective expansion, no species had ever used ramming attacks against his ships. It was primitive, wasteful, and completely irrational. It was also surprisingly effective. "One ship down," he muttered. 11 remain. Destroy the remaining human vessels immediately, but the humans weren't finished with their surprises. The colonial defense boats had spread out in all directions, moving in erratic patterns that made them difficult to target. When the Zephyrian ships fired their energy weapons, the small human craft would dive behind asteroids or use the planet's gravity well to change direction suddenly. One of the defense boats, piloted by a colonial militia captain named Rodriguez, had an idea that would have been considered insane by any civilized military force. He set his ship's fusion reactor to overload and aimed it at the largest Zephyrian vessel he could reach. "This is Defense Boat 7, Rodriguez broadcast on all frequencies. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my kids their daddy was proud to be human." The explosion when his reactor went critical was visible from the planet's surface. The Zephyrian dreadnought's shields absorbed most of the blast, but the electromagnetic pulse from the fusion reaction temporarily disabled their weapon systems. That gave the other human boats the opening they needed. Defense Boat 3, commanded by a former merchant marine named Collins, had modified his mining laser into an improvised cutting beam. While the dreadnought's weapons were offline, he flew directly at its command section and began cutting through the hull. "What are they doing?" Vexthai demanded. "They appear to be attempting to breach our hull using industrial equipment," Nethvar reported. "It should be impossible. Their tools are too primitive to penetrate our armor." But Collins wasn't trying to cut through the armor. He was targeting the ship's sensor arrays and communication dishes. Within minutes, the dreadnought was blind and unable to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. The remaining defense boats used similar tactics. They didn't try to win a conventional battle against superior forces. Instead, they used guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run attacks, and suicide missions that no Zephyrian commander had ever encountered. Defense Boat 5 used its cargo hold full of mining explosives to blow a hole in another escort's engine section. Defense Boat 2 released all its atmosphere in a cloud of frozen crystals that confused the alien sensors. Defense Boat 8 used its magnetic grapples to attach itself to an enemy ship and began broadcasting human music and poetry on all frequencies, jamming their communications. Within an hour, 4 Zephyrian ships were destroyed or disabled, and the rest were damaged and confused. The humans had lost all their ships, but they had proven that advanced technology wasn't everything in warfare. Vexthai was no longer amused. He was beginning to feel something the Zephyrian collective had forgotten how to experience. "Fear. Sub-Curator," he said. "Contact the collective High Command. Request immediate reinforcements. A full battle fleet. High Curator." Nethvar looked confused. "Surely we can handle these primitives ourselves. They have no ships left." "These humans are not like other species we have encountered," Vexthai replied. "They fight like animals. They have no sense of self-preservation. They turn their own deaths into weapons." On the surface of New Terra, the colonists had watched the space battle with a mixture of pride and grief. They had lost their defenders, but those brave pilots had shown the aliens that humans would not be intimidated. Governor Martinez called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Council. "People, we need to face facts. Our ships are gone. The aliens will be back with more forces. We need to decide whether to evacuate or stay and fight." Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent the last few hours studying the wreckage patterns from the space battle. Her analysis was troubling. "Governor, I've been looking at the debris from the alien ships. Their technology is more advanced than ours, but it's also more complicated. They rely heavily on automated systems and energy shields. I think that's why our ramming attacks worked so well." "What do you mean?" Martinez asked. "I mean their shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and small projectiles. They're not designed to handle sustained physical contact with large masses. It's like they've never encountered anyone crazy enough to use ramming attacks." A colonial militia captain named Torres spoke up. "Doc, are you saying we can hurt them with primitive tactics?" "I'm saying their advanced technology might actually be a weakness," Elena replied. "They've become so dependent on their automated systems that they don't know how to adapt when someone does something unexpected." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the colony's orbital sensor station. The operator's voice was tense with excitement. "Governor, we're picking up massive hyperspace signatures. Multiple ships incoming, big ones." Martinez felt his heart sink. The aliens were returning with reinforcements just as they had threatened. "How many ships?" "Sir, I count—" "Wait. Governor, These aren't alien ships. They're human. It's the Earth Defense Fleet. The room erupted in cheers. Through the colony's main viewport, they could see new stars appearing in the sky as human warships dropped out of hyperspace. The cavalry had arrived. Admiral Marcus Harrison's flagship, the EDF Righteous Fury, was 3 times larger than Sarah Chen's cruiser had been. Around it flew the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled: 24 heavy cruisers, 48 destroyers, and 60 escort vessels. Harrison had received Sarah's final transmission 8 hours ago. Her last message had been brief. "Admiral, the aliens killed our people and called us primitive. We're going to show them what humans do when you threaten our families. If we don't, make it. Tell Earth that we died free." Now Harrison looked at the tactical display showing the remains of the human defense force scattered among the wreckage of alien ships. Sarah Chen and her people had been outnumbered 12-1, but they had taken half the enemy with them. "Communications," Harrison ordered. "Open a channel to the alien flagship." Vexthai appeared on the screen, and Harrison could see the fear in the alien's large black eyes. "Good. Let him be afraid." "I am Admiral Harrison of the Earth Defense Fleet," Harrison said, his voice cold as space itself. "I understand you have a problem with human colonists." "Admiral," Vexthai replied, trying to sound authoritative, "you are in violation of collective space. Your ships must withdraw immediately or we will be forced to destroy them." Harrison looked at the tactical display again. 8 Zephyrian ships, half of them damaged, against his fleet of more than 100 vessels. The alien was either very brave or very stupid. "High Curator," Harrison said, "let me explain something to you about humans. When you killed 50 miners and destroyed our defense force, you made this personal. We don't forget, and we don't forgive. You wanted to teach us about galactic law? Let me teach you about human law. You hurt our people. We hurt you back, twice as hard." The transmission ended and Harrison turned to his tactical officer. "All ships, attack formation. Target their weapons and engines. I want prisoners for interrogation." The Battle of New Terra lasted exactly 11 minutes. The Zephyrian ships, designed for fighting other energy weapon-equipped vessels, were completely unprepared for the volume of kinetic projectiles the human fleet could produce. Their shields overloaded within the first few minutes, and their hulls were shredded by mass driver rounds and nuclear-tipped missiles. When it was over, 2 Zephyrian ships had been destroyed, and 6 had surrendered. Vexthai found himself in the unusual position of being a prisoner of war. Dr. Vasquez was among the first scientists to examine the captured alien technology. What she found confirmed her theories and gave her new ideas about how to fight these invaders. "Admiral," she reported, "their ships are incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly complex. Every system is automated and networked together. If we can figure out how to disrupt their computer networks, we might be able to turn their own technology against them." Harrison nodded. "Doctor, I'm giving you unlimited resources and a research team. Figure out how to beat these aliens with their own weapons." In the Zephyrian detention facility, Vexthai sat in his cell and tried to understand what had gone wrong. The humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to run when faced with superior technology. Instead, they had fought like demons and somehow managed to turn a hopeless battle into a victory. For the first time in his long life, the High Curator began to wonder if the Zephyrian collective had finally encountered a species they couldn't defeat. On Earth, news of the first alien contact spread like wildfire. The human government called emergency sessions. Military leaders began planning for a war unlike anything in human history. Scientists started working around the clock to understand and improve upon captured alien technology. But most importantly, the human people began to unite in a way they never had before. National boundaries suddenly seemed meaningless when faced with an alien threat. Political differences were set aside in favor of species survival. The Zephyrian collective had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about galactic power. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human soul since the first human picked up a rock to defend his family. They had awakened the human war machine. And once awakened, it would not go back to sleep until every threat to humanity was eliminated. The news reached Earth at 0347 GMT on a Tuesday morning. Within 6 hours, every major city on the planet was in chaos. Not the bad kind of chaos, the productive kind. The kind that happens when an entire species realizes it's not alone in the universe and the neighbors aren't friendly. President Maria Santos stood in the Oval Office, looking at screens showing massive crowds gathering outside government buildings across the globe. In Beijing, Moscow, London, Delhi, and Sao Paulo, people were demanding action. Not panic, not surrender, but action. "Ma'am," said General Patricia Williams, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, "we're seeing unprecedented cooperation from every nation. On Earth, the Russians are offering their entire space fleet. The Chinese are converting their manufacturing base to military production. Even the Swiss are talking about militarizing their orbital platforms." Santos nodded grimly. "How long before we can have a real fleet in space? If we convert every shipyard, every manufacturing facility, and every resource extraction operation?" Williams paused to check her tablet. 6 months for a fleet twice the size of Harrison's. 12 months for something that could challenge an entire alien civilization. "Make it happen," Santos said. "And get me Dr. Chen from the Lunar Research Station. If we're going to war with advanced aliens, we need our best minds working on this." Dr. James Chen, no relation to the late Captain Sarah Chen, though he felt a personal connection to her sacrifice, was already deep into studying the captured Zephyrian technology when the call came. What he had found both excited and terrified him. "Mr. President," he said when the secure connection was established, "the alien technology is remarkable, but it has a fundamental flaw. They've automated everything. I mean, everything. Their ships don't just have automated weapons and navigation. They have automated decision-making systems, automated tactical responses, even automated diplomatic protocols." "Is that bad?" Santos asked. "It's predictable," Chen replied. "And predictable can be beaten. These Zephyrians have been using the same tactics for thousands of years because their computers tell them those tactics work. They can't adapt quickly to new threats because their systems aren't designed for rapid innovation." General Williams leaned forward. "Doctor, are you saying we can outthink them?" "I'm saying we can outhuman them," Chen said with a grin. "They think in terms of logical responses to known threats. We think in terms of creative solutions to impossible problems. They see ramming attacks as wasteful and irrational. We see them as effective tools for specific situations." While the scientists worked on understanding alien technology, the military was already putting human ingenuity to work. Commander Jake Torres, brother of the mining station commander who had died in the first attack, was leading a project that would have horrified any civilized military planner. Torres had taken a standard cargo freighter and packed it with nuclear warheads, industrial explosives, and corrosive chemicals. The plan was simple: get close to enemy ships and detonate everything at once. He called it the spite ship because its only purpose was to make the enemy pay a price for killing humans. "Sir," his executive officer said, "are we sure this will work? The aliens have energy shields. Shields are designed to deflect energy in small projectiles," Torres replied. "They're not designed to handle 1,000,000 tons of exploding freighter moving at significant fractions of light speed. Besides, this isn't about efficiency. This is about sending a message." The message was simple: hurt humanity, and humanity will hurt you back in ways you never imagined. Similar projects were starting up all over human space. On Mars, engineers were converting asteroid mining ships into kinetic bombardment platforms. In the belt, miners were developing swarm tactics using hundreds of small, cheap vessels that could overwhelm enemy targeting systems. On Europa, scientists were working on biological weapons specifically designed to target Zephyrian physiology. But the most important work was happening in the shipyards of Earth's orbit. The new human warships looked nothing like the elegant Zephyrian vessels. They were ugly, brutal things that looked like flying fortresses. Every surface was armored, every system was redundant, and every weapon was designed to keep firing even when the ship was falling apart. Admiral Harrison, newly promoted to overall commander of human space forces, walked through the construction bay of the largest ship humanity had ever built. The EDF Retribution was 5 kilometers long and packed with enough firepower to level a small moon. "Admiral," said the ship's chief engineer, "I have to ask, why build them so brutal? We could make them more elegant, more efficient." Harrison paused to look at a memorial wall showing pictures of everyone who had died in the first alien attacks. Sarah Chen's picture was in the center, surrounded by the 50 miners and the colonial defense pilots. "Engineer," he said quietly, "we're not building these ships to win a civilized war. We're building them to survive an uncivilized one. The aliens think we're primitive? Good. Let them think that right up until the moment our primitive ships tear their pretty vessels apart." The first test came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a Zephyrian fleet approaching the outer colonies. 24 ships, all larger than anything in the original attack force. They were coming to finish what they had started. High Admiral Kethmore of the Zephyrian Collective reviewed the intelligence reports with growing confusion. According to his scouts, the humans had built an enormous fleet in just a few months. That should have been impossible for such a primitive species. "Sub-Admiral," he said to his aide, "how many ships are the humans fielding?" "Intelligence estimates over 300 vessels, High Admiral, but most appear to be converted civilian craft or hastily constructed warships. Our analysts believe their construction quality is poor." Kethmore nodded. "As expected from such a young species. They build quickly but without skill. Our 24 dreadnoughts should be more than sufficient to destroy their entire fleet." He was about to learn why human military doctrine included the phrase "quantity has a quality all its own." The Battle of Proxima Centauri began with the humans doing something no civilized species would consider. They charged. All 300 human ships, from massive battlecruisers to tiny converted freighters, accelerated directly at the Zephyrian fleet at maximum speed. The aliens opened fire at maximum range, their energy weapons lancing out across millions of kilometers to strike the human ships. Dozens of human vessels exploded or vented atmosphere, but the rest kept coming. "Why don't they retreat?" Kethmore demanded. "They're losing ships." "High Admiral," his tactical officer replied. "They appear to be using their damaged vessels as shields for the undamaged ones, and, sir, some of the damaged ships are accelerating toward our formation." Kethmore watched in horror as burning human ships, their hulls torn open and their crews probably dead, continued to close the distance. They were using their dying vessels as missiles. The first human ship to reach the Zephyrian line was a converted ore hauler called the Vindictive. It had taken 6 direct hits and was venting plasma from ruptured conduits, but it was still moving at a significant fraction of light speed when it rammed into the Zephyrian flagship's shields. The shields held for exactly 2.3 seconds before the kinetic energy overloaded them. The ore hauler's massive hull, loaded with industrial explosives, punched through the flagship's armor and detonated in the ship's central core. Both ships vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. "High Admiral is dead," someone screamed over the command channel. "The Herald of Truth is destroyed." But the humans weren't done. Ship after ship slammed into the Zephyrian formation, some firing weapons until the last second, others simply using their mass as a final weapon. The aliens' precise formation dissolved into chaos as captains tried to avoid the suicidal human attacks while still maintaining effective firing positions. That's when the human heavy cruisers arrived. These weren't converted civilian ships. These were purpose-built warships designed by engineers who had studied captured Zephyrian technology and figured out how to beat it. They opened fire with kinetic weapons that fired solid slugs at incredible velocities, overwhelming the aliens. Energy shields through sheer volume. Commander Torres's spite ships proved their worth in the chaos. The modified freighters weren't fast or well-armed, but when they exploded next to enemy vessels, the combination of nuclear fire and corrosive chemicals ate through alien hulls like acid through paper. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 18 Zephyrian ships had been destroyed and 6 had surrendered. The humans had lost over 200 vessels, but they had won. More importantly, they had captured intact Zephyrian ships with their crews still alive. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now promoted to head of the Human-Alien Technology Integration Project, was among the first to board the captured vessels. What she found revolutionized human understanding of galactic politics. "Admiral Harrison," she reported, "these aren't just warships. They're mobile command centers for governing conquered worlds. The Zephyrians don't just defeat other species, they integrate them into their collective as slave races." Harrison studied the alien computer files with growing anger. "How many species are we talking about, Doctor?" "Based on their records, hundreds, maybe thousands. The Zephyrian collective isn't just one species ruling empty space. It's an empire built on enslaved worlds with the Zephyrians at the top and everyone else serving their needs." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just fighting for their own freedom. They were potentially fighting to liberate entire civilizations. But first they had to survive the war. The captured aliens, when interrogated, revealed that the fleets humanity had fought so far were just advanced scouts. The real Zephyrian military was still mobilizing, and when it arrived it would bring thousands of ships and weapons humanity couldn't even imagine. "How long do we have?" Harrison asked the lead interrogator. "According to the prisoners, sir, about 6 months before the Grand Fleet arrives. When it does, they'll have enough firepower to glass every human world simultaneously." Harrison nodded grimly. 6 months to prepare for a war that would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or joined the ranks of Zephyrian slaves. But humanity had learned something important in their first battles. Advanced technology and overwhelming numbers weren't everything. Sometimes courage, ingenuity, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom could overcome impossible odds. The Zephyrians thought humans were primitive. They were right, in a way. Humans were primitive enough to use ramming attacks, biological weapons, and suicide missions. They were primitive enough to turn every civilian ship into a potential weapon. They were primitive enough to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. That primitiveness was about to become humanity's greatest strength. On Earth, President Santos addressed a joint session of the Global Assembly. Her message was broadcast to every human world and every human ship in space. "My fellow humans," she said, "we stand at a crossroads in our species' history. We can surrender our freedom and join the ranks of alien slaves, or we can fight for the right to determine our own destiny. I know what choice we'll make, because I know what it means to be human. We don't surrender, we don't give up, and we don't let anyone tell us we're not worthy of freedom." The response from across human space was immediate and unanimous. Every world, every station, every ship in space sent the same message: we fight. The war was just beginning, but humanity was ready. They had learned to turn their supposed weaknesses into strengths, their primitiveness into an advantage. The Zephyrians wanted a civilized war fought by civilized rules. They were about to discover that humans had never been particularly civilized when their survival was at stake. The message came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez was deep in her laboratory, working on integrating captured Zephyrian technology into human weapon systems, when her computer chimed with an incoming transmission on a frequency that shouldn't have existed. The voice that spoke was not human. It was musical, with multiple tones that suggested the speaker had more than one vocal cord. "Dr. Vasquez of the human species, I am Melodic Harmony of Truth, speaker for the Symphonic Confederation. We wish to communicate." Elena nearly dropped her coffee cup. First contact with the second alien species, and they were calling her directly. Yes, I'm Dr. Vasquez. How did you get this frequency?" "We have been monitoring Zephyrian communications for many cycles," the alien replied. "We have watched your species conflict with interest. You fight in ways we have not seen before, ways that hurt the collective." Elena's pulse quickened. "Are you enemies of the Zephyrians?" "We are." "What is your word?" "Slaves. My people have served the collective for 800 years. We build their ships, grow their food, maintain their technology. Until now, we never believed rebellion was possible." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. "How many species are enslaved by the collective?" 47 that we know of. Some have served for thousands of years, others are recent additions. All have tried to resist at first. All have failed. Until you. Elena's mind raced. What do you want from us? Information, tactics, hope. The alien's voice carried emotions Elena couldn't identify. Your ramming attacks, your suicide weapons, your refusal to follow their rules of war, these things work. We want to learn them. Admiral Harrison arrived in Elena's lab within the hour, along with General Williams and President Santos, who had been visiting the lunar facility. The conversation that followed would change the course of the war. Melodic Harmony of Truth, who asked to be called Harmony for simplicity, revealed information that stunned the human leadership. The Zephyrian Collective controlled over 300 star systems, but their actual military force was smaller than expected. Most of their power came from automated systems and the labor of enslaved species. The Zephyrians number only in the millions, Harmony explained. They rule through superior technology and fear. But if their slave species were to rebel simultaneously, the collective would collapse, Harrison finished. But how do we coordinate with dozens of species across hundreds of light years? We have been preparing for this opportunity for centuries, Harmony replied. Secret communication networks, hidden weapons caches, sleeper agents in key positions. We just never had a spark to light the fire of rebellion. Santos leaned forward. And we're the spark? You are the proof that the collective can be beaten. Your tactics, shared among the enslaved worlds, could begin a galaxy-wide uprising. But first, humanity had to survive the incoming Grand Fleet. The Zephyrian response to their early defeats had been swift and brutal. Grand Admiral Zexthal, Supreme Commander of Collective Military Forces, had assembled the largest fleet in Zephyrian history, 3,000 ships ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift attack cruisers. Zexthal studied tactical reports from the human conflicts with growing concern. These primitive beings fought without honor, without logic, without any regard for accepted military doctrine. They used their own deaths as weapons and seemed to grow more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. Admiral, his aide said, intelligence reports suggest the humans have been contacted by elements from enslaved species. There are signs of unrest on several worlds. Expected, Zexthal replied. The slave species always become restless when they see their masters challenged. We will deal with them after we eliminate the human threat. Send orders to all sector commanders. Any world showing signs of rebellion is to be subjected to orbital bombardment until compliance is restored. The order went out across the collective, but it came too late. Harmony's people had been busy. The industrial world of Kepler 438b, enslaved Takari workers had spent months secretly modifying the robotic systems that built Zephyrian ships. When the Grand Fleet support vessels arrived for supplies and maintenance, they found their automated systems turning against them. The Vorthan mining colonies in the Centaurus sector had been quietly stockpiling explosives and improvised weapons. When Zephyrian security forces tried to crack down on suspected dissidents, they found themselves facing coordinated guerrilla warfare from an entire species that had been waiting 800 years for revenge. Even more dangerous was the rebellion among the Zephyrians' computer systems. The Sindari, a species of cybernetic beings who had been forced to maintain collective information networks, began introducing subtle errors into navigation systems, communication protocols, and tactical databases. But the most important contribution came from the hegemonic remnant, the survivors of a species that had nearly defeated the collective centuries earlier, before being overwhelmed and enslaved. They had something no other rebel group possessed: detailed intelligence on Zephyrian military capabilities and weaknesses. Admiral Harrison reviewed the intelligence data with amazement. They're giving us complete technical specifications for every ship class in the Grand Fleet. Armor thicknesses, shield frequencies, weapon ranges, even psychological profiles of their commanders. Dr. Vasquez had been working around the clock to integrate alien technology with human weapons. The results were revolutionary. Admiral, with this information, we can build weapons specifically designed to counter their defenses. Frequency-matched energy weapons that can punch through their shields. Kinetic penetrators designed to exploit weak points in their armor. Even computer viruses that can disable their automated systems. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: human children. The Global Education Initiative had been using the war as a teaching opportunity, encouraging students to think creatively about military problems. A group of 12-year-olds in Mumbai had proposed using the aliens' own automated systems against them. "Why do we have to fight their ships?" asked Priya Sharma, age 12. "Why don't we just tell their computers to do what we want instead of what they want?" The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. The Zephyrians' over-reliance on automation meant that if humans could hack their command systems, they could turn entire fleets against each other. Working with their new alien allies, human programmers began developing the most sophisticated computer virus in galactic history. They called it Prometheus, the firebringer who gave technology to humanity. The Grand Fleet arrived at the edge of human space exactly 6 months after the first attacks. 3,000 Zephyrian ships in perfect formation, moving with the mechanical precision that had conquered dozens of star systems. Grand Admiral Zexthul opened communications with the human colonies, expecting the same plea for mercy he had received from countless species before. Instead, he got Admiral Harrison. "Grand Admiral," Harrison said, his voice calm and confident, "I want to thank you for bringing such a large fleet to our space. It'll make target identification much easier." Zexathul's pale blue features showed confusion. "Human Admiral, you face the largest military force ever assembled by the collective. Your species cannot possibly hope to defeat us. I offer you one final opportunity to surrender with dignity." Harrison smiled, an expression that translated poorly to Zephyrian physiology, but somehow conveyed menace anyway. "Grand Admiral, let me explain something to you about humans. We don't surrender, we adapt, and we make friends." That was the signal. Across collective space, the rebellion erupted simultaneously. Enslaved species struck at military installations, industrial centers, and communication networks. Ships under construction exploded in their orbital yards. Computer systems began displaying human music and poetry instead of tactical data. Automated defense platforms turned their weapons on Zephyrian command centers, but the Grand Fleet was too far from collective space to be immediately affected. Zexthul ordered his ships to attack despite the chaos erupting behind him. That's when he discovered what humanity had been building. The human fleet that rose to meet him numbered only 800 ships, but they were unlike anything the Zephyrians had seen. These weren't the desperate converted civilian vessels from earlier battles. These were warships designed by humans who had studied captured alien technology and figured out how to beat it. The UES Retribution, Admiral Harrison's flagship, fired the opening shot of the battle. Instead of kinetic projectiles or energy weapons, it fired something completely unexpected, a computer virus transmitted via modulated laser pulses. The virus hit the Grand Fleet's communication network and began spreading through their automated systems like wildfire. Ships began firing on each other. Navigation systems started sending vessels into collision courses. Weapons platforms targeted their own command bridges. "What is happening?" Zexthul demanded as his fleet dissolved into chaos around him. "You wanted to learn about human technology," Harrison replied over the communication channel. "That's called hacking. We learned it from some friends of yours. Former friends, I should say." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human ships, working in coordination with alien rebels and supported by hacked Zephyrian systems, tore through the Grand Fleet with brutal efficiency. Commander Torres, now captain of a ship specifically designed for ramming attacks, led a squadron of armored vessels directly into the enemy formation. But this time, instead of simple kinetic impacts, his ships were equipped with Elena's new weapons: gravity bombs that collapsed enemy shields, quantum disruptors that tore apart alien hulls at the molecular level, and neural scramblers that drove Zephyrian crews temporarily insane. The spite ships had evolved too. The new versions carried swarms of self-replicating nanobots programmed to disassemble enemy vessels and turn the raw materials into more human weapons. One converted freighter could potentially destroy dozens of enemy ships given enough time. But the most devastating human innovation was psychological warfare. Speakers throughout the human fleet broadcast messages in the languages of enslaved species, calling for rebellion, and promising freedom. Many Zephyrian ships had enslaved crews maintaining their systems, and hearing calls for liberation in their native tongues caused widespread mutinies. Grand Admiral Zexthul watched his magnificent fleet tear itself apart and finally understood what his species had awakened. The humans weren't just another primitive species to be conquered. They were a catalyst, a spark that could ignite rebellion across the entire collective. "Signal retreat," he ordered. "Sir?" his aide asked in confusion. "We still have over 2,000 ships. We have 2,000 ships that don't obey orders, weapons that target our own forces, and crew members who are actively sabotaging their vessels," Zexthul replied grimly. "This battle is lost. Signal retreat before we lose everything." But it was too late for retreat. The human fleet had surrounded the Zephyrian formation, and Admiral Harrison was in no mood to let potential enemies escape. "Grand Admiral," Harrison said over the communication channel, "you came here to destroy humanity. We're going to make sure you never get another chance." The Battle of Sol lasted 18 hours. When it ended, fewer than 300 Zephyrian ships managed to escape. The rest were captured, destroyed, or had joined the rebellion after their enslaved crews took control. Zexthul himself was taken prisoner when his flagship's computer systems were hacked, and his ship was boarded by human Marines who fought through the corridors with kinetic weapons and improvised explosives. Dr. Vasquez was among the first to interview the captured Grand Admiral. His words would haunt her for years afterward. "You don't understand what you have done," he said, his large black eyes reflecting genuine terror. "The collective has maintained order for thousands of years. Without us, the galaxy will descend into chaos." "Maybe," Elena replied, "but it'll be free chaos. And freedom is worth a little chaos." Across collective space, the rebellion was spreading faster than the Zephyrians could contain it. Species that had been enslaved for millennia were rising, up with weapons and tactics learned from human broadcasts. The rigid order that had defined galactic civilization was cracking apart. And at the center of it all, humanity stood victorious, no longer the primitive species that could be easily dismissed. They had proven that advanced technology and overwhelming numbers weren't everything in warfare. Sometimes all it took was the courage to fight for freedom, the creativity to find new solutions to old problems, and the willingness to make friends with former enemies. The Zephyrian collective was falling, but something new was rising to take its place. Something built on cooperation instead of domination, on freedom instead of slavery. Something human. The Zephyrian homeworld of Nexus Prime had never seen war. For 3,000 years it had been the center of galactic civilization, a pristine world of crystal spires and floating cities where the pure-blooded Zephyrians lived in luxury, while their enslaved subjects toiled on distant worlds. That was about to change. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, now the flagship of the largest fleet in galactic history. Around his ships flew vessels from 47 different species, all united under human leadership in what they called the Liberation Alliance. The fleet was massive. Over 5,000 ships ranging from human dreadnoughts to Takari stealth, frigates to massive Vorthan industrial vessels converted into mobile weapons platforms. But more than the numbers, it was the diversity that made this fleet special. Each species brought their own tactics, their own technology, their own burning desire for revenge against their former masters. "Admiral," reported Commander Park from the communication station, "we're receiving surrender offers from 12 Zephyrian outposts in this system. They're offering to release all enslaved populations in exchange for safe passage." Harrison's expression remained cold. "Tell them their surrender offers are noted and rejected. They'll surrender unconditionally, or they'll be destroyed. There are no other options." 6 months had passed since the Battle of Sol, and the galaxy had been transformed. The Zephyrian collective's iron grip on galactic civilization had shattered completely. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were now free, and they wanted blood. The humans had become the de facto leaders of the rebellion, not through conquest but through respect. When the Takari worlds were threatened by Zephyrian retaliation, it was human ships that arrived to defend them. When the Vorthan colonies needed medical supplies, it was human transports that brought them. When species that had been enemies for millennia needed help resolving disputes, it was human diplomats who mediated. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the Alliance's chief technology coordinator, had spent months integrating the technologies of dozens of species. The results were weapons and defensive systems beyond anything any single race could have developed alone. "Admiral," she reported from the science station, "our hybrid shields are holding steady. The combination of human kinetic barriers, Zephyrian energy deflectors, and Sindari quantum scramblers is proving remarkably effective. But the most important development wasn't technological, it was philosophical. The humans had introduced concepts that were revolutionary to galactic politics, democratic decision-making, individual rights, and the idea that no species had the right to rule over another. High Curator Vexisthai, the alien who had started this war with his arrogant demands, sat in a detention cell aboard the Retribution and watched the tactical displays, showing the approach to his homeworld. The primitive humans he had dismissed as barely evolved primates were now leading a galactic revolution. "You still don't understand, do you?" Harrison said during one of their conversations. "This isn't about conquest. This isn't about replacing your empire with ours. This is about freedom." Vexthai's large black eyes reflected confusion. "Without order, without hierarchy, how do you maintain civilization? How do you prevent chaos?" "By trusting people to do the right thing," Harrison replied. "By giving them a choice and respecting their decisions. By working together instead of ruling over others." "Impossible," Vexthai said. "Lesser species cannot govern themselves. They need guidance, direction, control." Harrison smiled grimly. "You're about to find out just how wrong you are." The final battle began when the Liberation Fleet entered the Nexus system. The Zephyrians had assembled the last remnants of their military around their homeworld. 300 ships, many damaged from the ongoing rebellions, crewed by increasingly desperate officers who knew this was their last stand. Supreme Chancellor Velkara, the absolute ruler of what remained of the collective, addressed the approaching fleet from her palace on Nexus Prime. Her message was broadcast across the galaxy. "Primitive species," she said, her voice carrying the arrogance that had defined Zephyrian leadership for millennia. "You have disrupted the natural order of the galaxy. You have destroyed the peace and stability that the collective has maintained for 3,000 years. Turn back now, and we will consider merciful terms for your surrender." Admiral Harrison's response was broadcast on every frequency in known space. "Supreme Chancellor," he said, his voice carrying the weight of every species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule. "You had your chance for mercy when we first met your people. You chose violence. You chose to call us primitive, to murder our civilians, to threaten our families. You wanted war. Now you have it." He paused, looking directly into the camera so his words would carry across the galaxy. "But this isn't just about humanity anymore. This is about every species you've enslaved, every world you've conquered, every being you've treated as property. Today, we end your reign of terror forever." The final battle was not the grand fleet engagement the Zephyrians expected. Instead, it was a demonstration of everything the humans had learned about warfare, diplomacy, and the power of cooperation. The attack began with computer viruses transmitted by the Sindari cyber specialists. Within minutes, half the Zephyrian defense fleet was fighting their own automated systems. Their weapons turned on each other, their navigation systems sent them into collision courses, and their communication networks began broadcasting human music and poetry. While the Zephyrians struggled with their own technology, human marine battalions launched simultaneous assaults on military installations throughout the system. But these weren't standard military operations. They were liberation missions. Commander Torres, now leading the Alliance Marine Corps, broadcast messages in dozens of languages as his forces secured Zephyrian facilities. "To all enslaved beings in this system, you are now free. Lay down your work tools and take up arms. Today we fight not for conquest, but for liberation." The response was immediate. On orbital platforms, mining stations, and industrial facilities, throughout the system, enslaved populations rose in revolt. Zephyrian overseers found themselves outnumbered 1,000 to 1 by people who had been waiting lifetimes for this moment. Dr. Vasquez had developed special weapons for this final battle. Instead of simple destructive devices, she had created conversion bombs, weapons that rewrote the programming of Zephyrian automated systems, turning defense networks into liberation tools and transforming oppressive technologies into instruments of freedom. But the most devastating weapon was something no military strategist could have predicted: hope. Across the galaxy, beings who had lived their entire lives in bondage were seeing their masters defeated by a species that had been free for less than a century. The message was clear: freedom was possible, rebellion could succeed, and the natural order of oppression was not natural at all. Supreme Chancellor Velcara watched her empire crumble from her crystal palace. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy, rebellions on every world, military units defecting to the Alliance, even pure-blooded Zephyrians questioning the righteousness of their cause. "My lady," her aide reported, "the outer defenses have fallen. Alliance forces have landed on the planet's surface. They're advancing on all major cities." "Resistance?" Velcara asked. "Minimal. Most of our ground forces are refusing to fight. Some are actually joining the invaders." Velcara looked out at her beautiful capital city, with its soaring spires and floating platforms. Soon it would be occupied by aliens, ruled by beings she had considered inferior. The thought was unbearable. "Activate the final protocol," she ordered. Her aide's face went pale. "My lady, that will destroy the entire planet, our own people, our culture, everything we've built." "Better destruction than submission to primitives," Velcara said coldly. "If the collective cannot rule, then nothing shall remain." But the final protocol had been sabotaged months earlier by Zephyrian computer technicians who had grown tired of endless war. When Velcara gave the activation codes, nothing happened. Instead, her palace systems began broadcasting a message from Admiral Harrison. "Supreme Chancellor," Harrison said, his image appearing on every screen in the building. "Your final protocol has been disabled. Your weapons of mass destruction have been deactivated. Your reign is over." The palace doors opened and Alliance Marines walked in without resistance. They were led not by humans, but by beings from species the Zephyrians had enslaved. Takari, Vorthan, Sindari, and dozens of others, all armed, all free, all looking at their former master with mixtures of anger and pity. Velcara stood in her throne room, surrounded by the representatives of species she had considered beneath notice. For the first time in her long life, she felt truly afraid. "What do you want?" she asked. A Takari captain, his musical voice carrying harmonies of justice, spoke for all of them. "We want you to stand trial for your crimes. We want you to face the families of those you killed, the species you enslaved, the worlds you destroyed. We want justice." "And then?" Velcara asked. Admiral Harrison entered the throne room, flanked by representatives from every member species of the Liberation Alliance. His answer would define the future of galactic civilization. "Then we rebuild," he said. "We create something better than what you had. A galaxy where every species has a voice, where freedom is a right, not a privilege, where no one rules over others simply because they can." "Impossible," Velcara said, echoing Vexthai's words. "You cannot govern a galaxy through cooperation. There must be order, hierarchy, control." Harrison looked around the room at the diverse group of beings who had worked together to defeat the most powerful empire in galactic history. Humans, Takari, Vorthan, Sindari, and dozens of others, all different, all equal, all free. "We already have," he said. The war was over. The Zephyrian collective had fallen, not to another empire seeking dominance, but to an alliance of free peoples who had learned that cooperation was stronger than oppression, that diversity was more powerful than uniformity, and that the desire for freedom was universal. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to heal. The Alliance established the Galactic Council, where every species had an equal voice in governing their shared space. Trade networks were rebuilt based on cooperation rather than exploitation. Technologies were shared freely among all peoples. Former Zephyrian worlds were not conquered or punished, but offered membership in the new galactic community. Many Zephyrians, freed from the rigid hierarchy of their empire, discovered that they actually preferred democracy to autocracy. High Curator Vextai, serving a rehabilitation sentence rather than facing execution, worked with Dr. Vasquez to help integrate Zephyrian refugees into Alliance society. During one of their conversations, he finally asked the question that had haunted him since the war began. "How?" he said. "How did a species that had barely reached the stars defeat an empire that had ruled for millennia?" Elena smiled, looking out the window at the diverse crew of the research station where they worked. Humans, Zephyrians, Takari, and others worked side by side, sharing knowledge and building something greater than any of them could create alone. "Because," she said, "you forgot that the strongest force in the universe isn't technology or military might. It's the desire to be free, and once people taste freedom, they'll fight with everything they have to keep it." Years later, historians would debate the causes and consequences of the Zephyrian War. They would analyze military tactics, technological developments, and political changes. But they would all agree on one thing. The galaxy was a better place because humanity had refused to surrender when faced with impossible odds. Because they had chosen to fight for freedom instead of accepting slavery. Because they had made friends instead of enemies, built bridges instead of walls, and proved that the desire for liberty was truly universal. On the memorial wall of the rebuilt New Terra colony, next to the names of Captain Sarah Chen and all the others who had died in the first attacks, someone had written a simple message. They should have left the humans alone. But then, they wanted war. We gave them something better. We gave them freedom. And across the galaxy on 1,000 worlds where children of a dozen species played together under alien suns, freedom flourished. Because sometimes when the odds are impossible and the enemy seems unbeatable, all it takes is one species willing to stand up and say no to change everything. The humans had said no to the Zephyrian collective. The galaxy had listened, and nothing would ever be the same.